Hey friend, I'm Danielle Damrell, and I am so grateful that you're listening to the Created Worthy podcast. This show is all about honoring the life stories of women from different ages, beliefs, backgrounds, and experiences. Everyone's got a story, and instead of getting stuck in the trap of unworthiness, this is a safe place for stories to be shared. On this show, we chat about the transformative power of creative processing too, and how we can utilize our God-given creativity with intention to heal, grow, find joy, create simplicity in the midst of our chaotic lives. So pull up a seat at our table because we are all created worthy. Hello, welcome back to the Created Worthy podcast. Today, I'm joined by another worthy warrior, Nicole Marino Deinzer. Did I say that right?
Hello. Yeah. Moreno Deinzer. Yeah.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Nicole is a Latina entrepreneur and a digital nomad. Nicole has always been on a quest for adventure, as proven by her ability to balance going to school while traveling all over the world to places including Italy, Ireland, Spain, Mexico, Aruba, and so many more incredible destinations. But after working in a corporate office for quite some time, it became clear that she needed to build a career that would allow her to embrace her passion for travel. So with the goal of creating a life of fun and freedom in mind, she made her way into the online entrepreneurship industry. As long as she had Wi-Fi and her laptop, she could work from almost anywhere in the world. One time, she even planned a 1,000-person event from the lobby of her hotel in Italy. In 2020, amidst the global pandemic, she felt called to expand her impact and founded a la mode, a branding company alongside her trusted business advisor. It was clear that the world needed someone to step forward and create a personal branding company that was focused on getting Black, Indigenous, people of color, women specifically, stories out there. Throughout it all, she has and always will remain an avid dress wearer, proud Latina adventurer, and a calming voice who offers love and encouragement to all who have the privilege of getting to know her. I have had the absolute privilege of getting to know Nicole over the past 6-ish months as we
Yeah.
were in a goal-setting group together earlier this year, and then we became inseparable accountability partners. Nicole's
Yeah.
unique perspectives and ability to prioritize living over the hustle has been such a huge inspiration to me personally, and I can't wait for you listeners to hear from her too. Nicole, thank you so much for joining us today on the Created Worthy
Yeah.
podcast. I can't wait to
Uh,
hear even more about your real life story.
yes. Thank you so much for having me here. It's funny when you hear your bio back to you. I don't know if other people can relate to this when you're listening, but
Absolutely.
is that, oh yeah, I have done stuff, because I think every day
Yeah.
we're always like trying to grow and trying to be better and not taking a step back and be like, oh yeah, I did that. Never mind. So it was nice. Thank you.
Yeah, of course. It's like, oh yeah, I am an accomplished human being.
Yeah.
Like, yeah,
That.
I have done things. That's what actually one of my favorite things about Created Worthy, the pre-interview section or portion of booking on Created Worthy is that if you don't have a bio, because sometimes we do like personal stories of people who
Yeah.
don't necessarily have bios, and I give them templates on how to write a personal bio. And I love those. I love those because it's always like, I'm a mom. And you kind of get to celebrate your own accomplishments in this really unique way. And yeah, I just think everybody in the world should have a bio because it's a reminder of all that you've come through and all
Yeah.
that you are. Let's talk about your
Okay.
story. Who is Nicole? I think we should maybe start from the beginning. Could
Hmm.
you maybe paint us a picture of what your life was look like growing up for you?
Sure. So, if you guys are listening to this or watching, I am third generation Mexican American, and so that means my parents and grandparents were born here. Just to clarify, um, so I grew up in Gilroy, California. That is about an hour south of San Jose, 2 hours south of San Francisco. Just to give anyone that's not from California a picture. And I grew up in the countryside. So I grew up next to an orchard that had apple trees and an orange tree and a cherry tree and a walnut tree. So I grew up just with a lot of nature around. Across the street, there was like a horse ranch. Down the street, there was like a nursery um, where they grew like a bunch of flowers and then they sold them, at different flower marts. So very country road, very safe. I got to ride my bike on that road because there's not a lot of cars. Um, usually without a helmet. Right now I'm like, the kids need to wear a helmet. And
Don't
I
go too far.
had,
If I can't see you, you're too far. Our
yeah, and we
paradigms
would
have
go like
changed.
down the street and then up the street where it would curve, and it's just these country roads. And I grew up with my parents and then my three younger siblings, so I am the oldest. I always joke I have very older sister vibes.
Mm-hmm.
And I grew up in a very large family where a lot of my mom's extended family, so my aunts and my uncles, they all lived when I was younger, like within a 5-10 minute drive, right? Um, but they all, like my mom's side of the family all still lives in California, pretty much close to one another. And then my dad's side lived in Texas, and he was also from a large family. By large, let me just paint the picture. My mom's the youngest of 10, and my dad's the second to youngest of 13. So large.
Wow.
Everyone had
Really
kids,
large.
and those kids had kids. So there were times when by the time I was born, I had cousins that were already like 20 and they were starting their families. And so their kids were closer to my age. And so even though in my household, there was only like, for a time, 5 people, and then my youngest sister was born, so 6 people, but there was always family around. Like, just, I can't think of a weekend where we weren't seeing family. We had so many gatherings. Sometimes it was just a gathering because it was Saturday. And because of just how my parents, like, they built a very comfortable home. And so a lot of those family gatherings were in our home. So we were always the host. And so I also grew up knowing, like, sort of just instinctively knowing how to make your house and home like comfortable. My parents really loved us cleaning every Saturday morning. So cleaning, making sure your room was tidy because guests were always coming over, making sure you had plenty of food. My mom is like, one of the things that Nick told me, he's like, your mom is exceptional at making her house always welcoming for guests. There's plenty of food, plenty of blankets, plenty of pillows, like just every seating arrangement is comfortable, like it's homey. And so I grew up there until I was 13, and then we moved to Hollister, which is just a 20-minute drive from Gilroy. It's another small town. I'm surrounded by like fields and agriculture. And I moved there when I was 13. I thought I was like so cool now because I was living in town. I was living in the burbs, and I was like, oh, cool. I look like the kids in the shows that I watch. And and that's where my family still resides. They still reside in Hollister in a different house, though, a bigger house. Because like I said, my youngest sister was born. And so, the kids all needed their own room as they get older. And it's nice. My parents are still there. I would like to say my high school childhood room looks like mine, but so many people have lived in that house and rooms have changed. So it is now currently my sister's room. So it doesn't have any of my
Yes.
stuff. So that's sort of my childhood in a nutshell.
Yeah, I love that. One thing I would love is just a piece of advice to anyone who maybe struggles to make
Yeah.
their house feel homey. What
Oh.
is one, I know, kind of a strange question, but what is one thing that you could use or that you could recommend to just like make your house a little bit more welcoming? Like what do you think the most important thing is for a welcoming environment? Is it the food? Is it the pillows? Is it the guest room? What is it?
Yeah. There's a few things. I don't know if it's one
Okay.
thing. So let me give you like the list.
Yes, give me a list.
Yeah. The couch needs to be very comfortable. That's where people are going to gravitate towards, especially if you're a house where you're TV centric, so the TV's in the living room. So just the couch is very cozy and comfortable and could fit a lot of people depending on like how many people you want over. And then having like blankets nearby the couches so people could just cuddle because everyone has such different body temperatures,
Hmm.
which leads me to number two, making sure your house is the right temperature for the environment. So if you know you live somewhere where it's always hot, probably having AC. If you know you live somewhere where it's always cold, probably having, you know, like heat or a fireplace, um, so that way people aren't shivering or aren't sweating in your house.
What's the
And
right temperature? Like, because my right temperature is different than my husband's.
oh, I know. I'm weird. I like to be a little cold so I can have a
Me
blanket. I
too.
think it's the texture of the blanket. But again, I grew up in California and I also live in LA now. So my my idea of cold is going to be a lot different than other people's idea of cold. So I like to keep my house at a cool like between 73 to 75 degrees, but I like the AC sort of going.
Okay.
Because that cool air is so welcoming when you step out and it's super hot and you come back in and it's nice and chilly.
My perfect temperature is even colder. It's like 68 to 70.
Oh yeah. No, I lived in San Francisco in the Oakland area. That's where I went to school for like a very long time, my whole life, basically from like 21 to 35, let's say. Um, and you would think I would be used to the cold. I think I just tolerate it. If you haven't been to San Francisco, it is foggy, it is cold most of the time. Um, that's another little tip, by the way. If you do visit California, it's not sunny everywhere. Please bring a jacket. That's my PCA.
I love it.
Yeah.
So, okay, so we've got good couch and right temperature of house.
Right
What
temperature. And then also just different entertainment areas and different types of
okay.
entertainment. Doesn't mean your house has to be big, but depending on who's coming over, everyone has different energies. Some people are more extroverted, some people are more introverted. So having like an area where if the extroverted people want to sit around and talk, whether that's an outside bar or dining room table, they can, but having some quiet spaces where like maybe there's a TV in another room. So if the quiet person just wants to watch TV by themselves, or there's a quiet corner where they could just read or play a game by themselves or with one other person, it can't be like everyone has to be at the same spot, right? And so my mom does a good job at this where it's like the dining room table is where everyone meets, but there's like a pool table and a bar in the garage, and then like a little makeshift bar. And then there's like a bar in the backyard where there's a bunch of games and toys for kids, like to just get the kids to get their energy out. So like different areas really of where people can go. So that way it doesn't feel like everyone has to be at the same place. Because again, and I say this because I have a lot of like introverted friends, but it's like, oh, don't make them sit with like 20, 30 people. That's a lot.
Yeah, that's fair.
So,
Well, thank you for sharing that.
you're
I think that you are like the perfect person to be asking this since, and this is something we'll get into a little bit later, but you are like a lifestyle influencer. And
yeah.
so I think that this is so in line with the type of
I'm
advice.
laughing. I'm laughing because I'm like, I'm still not, I'm like, am I an influencer? I
You
don't.
are, well, you influence me and you're going to
Okay, there you go.
influence
There
whoever's
you go.
listening. So,
Yeah.
yeah, by
Okay.
definition, I think you're an influencer. And that's the direction that your brand is going, right? Is in
Yeah.
lifestyle, traveling, encouraging people to, live their lives well and to live it
Mhm.
in a way that is aligned with living and not just like hustling yourself into the ground. So,
Yes.
yeah, that's why I wanted to get your advice because you're
Okay.
amazing.
Thank you.
So, just moving right along, I know that you've been married you just celebrated your 10-year anniversary, is that right?
Yes. Yes.
So, let's go back to how you guys met and yeah, tell me your love story.
Okay. So my husband and I have actually been together for 17 years, been married for 10. So we met when I was 20, about to be 21, and he was 23, about to be 24. And I was not planning on meeting, I don't think either one of us was really planning on meeting like our soulmate or the person we're going to marry or that age. I was in a very let's just have fun phase in my life during that time. I went to community college first, so I was living in the Santa Cruz area. I moved out of my parents' house when I was 18, had an apartment with a roommate, was going to school, just really enjoying beach life, if you will, like school and boys and just having fun. And so when I met him in 2006, there we go. I was ready to have a boyfriend, but I wasn't ready to be like, I'm gonna settle down. Like I was never that person that's like, I'm gonna be married when I'm 25 and I'm gonna have a kid when I'm 27. Like I never had that planned out. I always had like career plan out, but I always felt like when it comes to love and anything with emotions, how much of that can you really plan? I'm just gonna sort of that part of my life, I'll just sort of go with the ride and go with the flow because I'm like, it has to do so much with the heart and there's so
Right.
many variables that you are not in control of that the universe, I guess, is controlling. So I'm like, I'm not even going to try to plan for that. So when I when I met him, I was like, okay, I do want to have a boyfriend. Let me try out this whole boyfriend and girlfriend thing. It's been fun having fun with all these other boys, but let's just try this boyfriend thing out. I had no idea it was gonna be like, wow, you're in my life forever. Um, so we met in 2016 in the parking lot of Chili's. Funny note, we've been to Chili's maybe twice since then. We are not, people ask us, do you go to Chili's for your anniversary? We're like, no, we don't. So he was working at the time. He just graduated from college. He went to UC Santa Cruz. And, your first job out of college is always sort of like so. It's never like the best job ever. So he took a job selling cell phones with a company that sold them in Costco. That company is no longer in Costco. I think they like cut their contract or Costco kicked them out, but it was called um, something wireless advocates or something like that. I don't know. And so he was a manager for one of those kiosks. And then my friend at the time was a manager for another kiosk. And so it was a whole area, like a district meeting of all the managers. And so they picked Gilroy, which is my hometown. It was in the summer. I was visiting my family. They picked there to go and have a managers meeting at Chili's. And because that way it was like a halfway point for everyone. And I went with my friend, like I drove with her there because I was like, oh, have your meeting. I'll walk around the shopping center. And then afterwards, like, because she was the friend that stayed in the hometown and I moved away. So I was like, oh, like I'm back. Let's like hang out. Let's grab lunch, coffee, and let's do some shopping, just catching up. And I'm like, okay. So I see him get out of the car and I'm like, he's so cute. And I remember seeing a picture of him before that and telling her, oh, he's cute. And she's like, yeah, he has a girlfriend. And I'm like, oh, okay. And then when I saw him in person, I was like, wow, he's cute. And she's like, oh, him and his girlfriend just broke up. And I'm like, okay, cool. I didn't know she did this until afterwards. I'm 20 years old. I'm still like a little like, um, she was, okay, let me just go into it. So she was the only female manager. So she goes into this meeting, and all the guys are like 23 to 27. So we're like the youngest. She goes into this meeting. I'm not there, but this is what everybody tells me. She goes in and she tells everyone. So it's all boys. In my mind, I'm like, oh my God, you totally embarrassed me. She's like, my friend thinks you're really cute. And I'm like, you blew it for me. So he comes out of that lunch meeting so cocky because he knew I thought he was cute. So I thought I had the upper hand, but I didn't realize he had the upper hand. And so we were like, I was really flirty, like just obviously flirting. And then he was obviously flirting. And then his little like smooth move was like he told me to get his phone number from my friend. He didn't want to give it to me. And I was like, why didn't you do that? He's like, well, I just wanted to see if you really liked me. And I'm like, okay. And so I had to get his phone number from my friend. And then we started texting like every day.
Playing games.
Yeah, I know. It's so funny. And so we started texting every day. And then he asked me out, and he till this day he feels bad. He's like, I didn't mean to ask you out via text. I just really wanted to ask you out, and I was so busy that day at work. So he asked me out via text, and I was so excited. So we went on our first date like a week later. We went to like the movies, and
Hmm.
it was just it was just like really. Mm, I think in the beginning we were just so like enamored with each other.
Yeah.
We clearly found each other like attractive, and I'm gonna be honest. I hope kids aren't listening to this. Our first date, we went to the movies and we just totally made out throughout the whole movie. Like we did not watch it. I think it was The Omen. It was like not even um
I love it.
yeah,
That
it
is
was
so funny.
like the young couple in the way back just making out, and yeah, and so that was our first date. And then throughout the summer, our date night was like Thursday night because I was at my parents' house, he was at his mom's house, and that was like 2 hours away from each other. And I think what also helped us is we met each other both when we were like in a transition in our life. I was um really thinking of moving to San Jose because I was still in community college and I still needed to take a few more classes before I transferred. And I was just going through a phase where I was like losing old friends because I wasn't in the party phase anymore and I wanted to change, you know. And then he was in a big transition because he just finished college. All his close friends moved back home, and back home could be like down in LA or something. And so he felt like a little lost. So I think we were surrounding ourselves individually with people that weren't aligned with our values, like personal values.
Mhm.
And I think what helped us is we aligned like we were each other's person. Like my values were similar to his values, but at that time our friends didn't have the same values. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so I think that's what really brought us together is I think we both knew we needed this next step, this change in our individual lives. And it's just easier to sort of have like someone on your team to help you with that change.
Yeah. I love that. I think that that's actually a really good point to bring up, and kind of what I was hoping to talk to you about next
Okay.
was the fact that like relationships are super fun, hopefully, in the beginning. They
But they're
can
hard
be,
as hell.
but they are hard. They can
Yeah.
be really hard. And when you've been in a marriage for like you've been in a relationship with him for 17 years, that takes intentionality, that takes lots of conversations, I'm sure,
Yeah.
and navigating through hard times, because
I
hard
feel
times
like
don't
it's
just
sometimes
happen
like going
once.
to war and then coming out.
Yes. Yes, over and over
Over.
and over and
Yeah.
over again. So yeah, tell me a little bit about how you guys have navigated through wars in your marriage,
Oh, well, to be
or
quite,
times of war, or
yeah,
times of trial.
yeah, to be really honest, because I don't want to sit here and I don't want people to watch or listen and be like, oh, her life is perfect. Like we're like in a big transitional change right now. And that's been difficult because it's like we are like these new adults now, and we have to constantly reintroduce each other to ourselves to each other, the new version. What are our new values? And then so to answer your question, looking back on it, like you know, when we've been through hard times, you know, there's been times where we don't do it healthy, right? Where we, especially when you're younger and you are still trying to figure out how to communicate your feelings, right? You're like feeling all this and you don't really know what's going on. So I think in the past, you know, we sometimes had seasons where we weren't 100% communicating what we were feeling. And I think that just has to do with like age. You're in your 20s, you're trying to sugarcoat a lot of things, you're trying to be an adult in the sense of like
Yeah.
what you think an adult is. Um, and so there was times where like just looking back on it, like especially with him, he let my husband I do let my husband, sorry, Nicholas, he has a tendency to sugarcoat a lot of things just because of like his upbringing. And so we had to work through like how like how to communicate, what does communicating look like for each of us, when do we need the other person to just listen, when do we need advice from the other person, giving each other space to just be mad, right? Because there's going to be
Mhm.
some days and some weeks or months or seasons where you're just going through a lot yourself internally that you're just mad, you
Yeah.
know, you're just angry, you don't want to be angry and mad, but you know, you're just you're becoming like a caterpillar to a butterfly, if you will, right?
Yeah.
And so
And you can't like give up just
yeah,
like you can't give up the desire to one day get out of that place. Like that's
yeah.
where a lot of I think relationships end and fail, is where you're mad for an extended period of time. And I'm not saying that there aren't valid reasons why people should get out of relationships. Obviously, I've been in a toxic
Oh,
relationship in the past, and
for sure.
100% look
For
for
sure.
the flags, seek sources of wisdom. All
Yeah.
of those things are true, but when you're in a committed relationship with somebody that you know is your person, in those seasons where you are just really angry, being able to be like, this is where I'm at right now, but this isn't where I always want to be. Where I want to be is still fill in
Hmm.
the blank, right? And like using that in those seasons, at least for me, sorry to like go
Yeah, no,
go
no.
back, but
Go ahead.
at least for me, just to be able to be like, this is a now situation, but this isn't a forever situation.
Yeah.
And also recognizing in those seasons, you touched on this, about how we all have different upbringings. We
Yes.
all have different childhoods. We have different parents. We had different school
Mm.
experiences. We had different relationships with our friends. We had different expectations of our lives. Even if you align in so many ways, like when you're in a committed relationship with another person, like they're still a separate human being. They still
Yeah.
lived most likely an entire life before being with you, in whatever length that was, whether you're young or
Yeah.
you're old, like that's their life. And so
Hmm.
they have things that make them who they are. And we've kind of been walking through a hard season recently too, but one thing I really appreciate is the fact that it's not like this is your problem
Yes.
because I'm the one that's angry. It's rather it's like this is still our problem because we're in this together,
Hmm.
but let's figure out what the roots are. So I'm going to go work on my own things from my childhood. I'm going to go figure out my triggers and how I can be less reactive to them, while you figure out these things about yourself and why you show up in a relationship or you feel you react in these other ways that just aren't healthy, and put us in those times where it's like, okay, now we're just eye for an eye,
Yes.
right? Like you're
Yeah.
just like, well, I did this. Well, I did this. Well, I did this. Well, I did this. It's
Yeah.
like we all get stuck in those cycles, especially in marriage.
Oh, yeah.
And
For
getting
sure.
out of it, like, yes, I guess at some point somebody has to be the bigger person, but I just don't really like that phrase. I think at the end of the day, it's more of like an assessment of like who, like tapping into what I would call the Lord, your faith. Um, But however your faith looks, you
Yeah.
tap into that for discernment, and then you seek sources of wisdom around you to make sure that you are being held accountable. And like if you're angry, go be angry. Go talk to your best friend. Go talk to your mom if that's the type of relationship that you have. But don't just sit there and tear them down. Sit there
Yeah.
and at the end of the day or at the end of the conversation, make sure that you've gotten to a place of like, okay, now I'm willing to receive, like whether it's just like you're going to make it through it. That's why it's important to make sure that you're seeking wise sources of wisdom. And I don't know if that's been, or
Oh,
wise sources of wisdom. That's kind of a weird word. You're
yeah.
seeking wise people
Yeah.
to receive wisdom from. But
Yeah.
yeah, sorry, I just went on a soapbox. As you can tell,
No.
maybe this is a little bit of a hot button issue for me in my
Yeah,
life.
no, I love this. 'Cause I think this is like the first time I'm really talking about like marriage. And I think I'm in this season where I want to talk about it because like personally, like a lot of my close friends are single. And single like by choice, like it's like they're like maybe my age or honestly older and they just want to be single. And I'm like, that's beautiful. Like you have a great
Yeah.
independent life, but it's hard. I don't want to be like single people don't get it, but it's hard sometimes to be like, I have to include someone else in my life journey 24/7.
Mm-hmm.
I don't get to just pack up my stuff and just go to India for a year. I don't, that will be a very selfish thing, you know? it's like I have to include someone else. And it's not this like, throwback to like a 1950s housewife mindset. It's like I would also want my partner to also
Yeah.
not pack up his stuff and go to India for a year. You have to talk out all your big life decisions, your big life goals, your dreams with someone else all the time, and that can get very exhausting.
Yeah.
And so I love this. I love that we get to talk about marriage. And it's funny because one thing she talked about was getting words like from wise people. I do remember, like, again, Nick and I have been together since our early 20s. I feel like there was a season in our 20s where we were getting horrible advice because you're just
Yeah.
surrounded by other 20-year-olds, and they don't. Again, I feel like there's a season where everyone's trying to flex a little bit more, where you're trying to be an adult, but you're not really an adult, and it was,
Yeah, you haven't really figured out what adulting fully is. You know you have bills to
yeah,
pay now, and maybe by some miracle you have a house or you're paying rent, or
yeah,
you've got all of these different responsibilities, but the like pressure of life hasn't fully come down on you quite yet. And so
yeah,
maybe you're late to early 30s when you really start like developing roots as to what it
yeah,
means to live as an adult, not like learn to be an adult, but rather
yes,
like now you're living as an adult. You have to make decisions that continue to build your life as an adult, not just like gaining your footing.
yeah, yeah. And so, I guess going back to your original question, like, how do we like get through these hard times? Again, I think it's allowing each other space. And that is something we've learned just recently, just really giving each other space to feel our feelings. Can get really petty real fast. Like,
Me too.
I'm really good at, I have a really great memory, so I will remember everything.
Oh gosh.
I'm, Sometimes I'm like, I wish I would forget stuff. And so I have to, like, even just for me, manage my anger and my sadness, because I'm like, this isn't really going to help get to a solution. I need to be able to feel these feelings and feel them out. And how I feel my feelings is like crying. I let
Hmm.
out like a really good cry because I just need to get the negative emotions out. I'm not looking for him to like solve the problem at that particular moment. I'm not looking for a conversation at the particular moment. If anything, I'm looking for just like a hug and just like cuddles. Let me feel my feelings. Let me get to a more calming, rational place. And then we can get into the root of like what is going on. What was the breakdown in the communication? What was the problem? What was the expectations of one another that weren't met? And then, solving it from there. And then for him, I had to learn to not, I don't want to say coddle him, but because I grew up in such a large family, I grew up with a lot of different examples of how to live your life, from like cousins to aunts and uncles to my parents, my siblings. So I think I was just built more with a lot more like empathy and compassion. He grew up in a more individual household. It was smaller. It was all about like who's ever the loudest wins, you know? And I grew up a more balanced. So because of that, I feel like I'm able to see his life and his world from his perspective a little bit clearer than he's able to see my life and my world from my perspective, right? So because of that, I've had to recognize to not always put myself in his shoes and try to solve his problems for him, because I could see the solution so clearly, but I'm like, not my problem to solve. Not
Yeah.
my problem to solve. He has to do it on his own time, his own terms, and he will get there. And there's times where I'm like, he gets there, and I'm like, if it was me, I would have gone there like 2 weeks ago. I don't know why I took you.
Right.
But and one of the things that's helped us recently a lot in this last few years is that we each have a therapist, right?
Yep.
Because there were things that I think were coming up. I think the pandemic brought up a lot of things for everyone. So I think there was stuff of like, for me, how I approach relationships, how I approach problem solving. And then for him, there was also similar, but I think we had to really both address how our individual childhoods affected us now as like adults. The good and the bad. I hate when people say like you talk about your child in therapy and that means like your whole childhood was bad. I'm like, no, there's like a lot of good in each of our childhoods, but there are little nuances in everyone's childhood
Yeah,
that
there are things to
you
work
still
through.
things to work through. I feel like there are times where people feel like, if you go to therapy and talk about your childhood was like really traumatic. And it's like, well, no, there's all those like little weird feelings that you have from your childhood that you take with you to your adulthood, and you want to start addressing those weird feelings, like why you get quiet if there's more than five people, or why do you feel the need to compromise all the time, right? Or why do
Mhm.
you feel like you can't express yourself? Um, or you feel like you have to solve everyone's problems. Like all those little things where um on the surface level it sounds great, right? It sounds like, oh, you like to help people, or you're really great at compromising, but it's also just like, well, is that really great for me, or do I feel like I have to do that? And
Mhm.
why do I feel like I have to do that? So really addressing like our childhoods and then bringing that into our relationship of like, well, this is what I'm learning about myself. This is probably why I've been approaching problems like this. I think I think therapy has been really helpful for both of us. And then also just finding other exercises to do individually, because we met so young that I think a big part of our lives were like intertwined. And we've
Mhm.
had to, I don't want to say like we had to be separate, but we had to be like okay having separate interest.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like we have, we're like Nick and Nicole, Nicole and Nick, but we're also like Nick and Nicole. And I think society sometimes makes people feel like if you're in a relationship, you have to be like a carbon copy of each other
Yep.
to be like a real couple, or to make sure
Mhm.
you're really in love. And we are very different people. Like we have just very different rhythms, very different temperaments, and very different interests, but we have a lot in common as well. And I think we had to be comfortable realizing, yeah, you're going to go do things that I don't really want to do, and vice versa. And then, what's going to be great? We could do those things together and we learn from each other. But it doesn't mean we have to be the exact same person.
Yep.
I hope that makes sense. I feel
No,
like I
that
had like
makes
five
no.
five thoughts there.
That was amazing. I loved every single point that you brought up with marriage because I think all of them work together, and those are the things that you learn as you walk through relationships. They're not just something that you know. And so
Yeah.
talking about them and having open conversations that are like, "Hey, like I love my husband. Here's our story, but also things are challenging at times, and it's kind of something that all couples across the board have to face challenges. That's part of our human experience.
Yeah.
It are walking through valleys. And if you're married or you're in a committed relationship, you're walking through valleys with someone else. And
Hmm.
so there are things like being okay finding your separate hobbies and interests and going. I mean everyone I think who's listened to this podcast knows this by now, but I am a huge therapy advocate. Go to therapy. You don't need to have
Yeah.
had the worst childhood in the world to
Yes.
go to therapy or benefit from therapy. Even I will say therapy is the most helpful if you have an intention for therapy. If you walk into therapy with an intention, so whether your intention is, hey, I think there are some things in my relationship that I'm feeling triggered by, or maybe your intention is, I know that there's probably some inner child work that I need to do, and I don't even know what that means. But going in there and being like, this is what I need help with. And that's kind of the privilege and blessing of getting older, is that you have more of that self awareness to know, okay, maybe this is rooting from this specific thing, and I don't have the answers as to how to get through it. But now I can seek advice and healing for this thing that keeps coming up in my life. And that's the benefit of therapy.
Yes.
Yeah.
I love that.
Okay. Well, let's talk a little bit about your business because in 2020, you pivoted to, was it full-time online entrepreneurship or did you do that
Yeah.
earlier?
Yeah, so let me take you guys back to my
Yeah.
career. So,
Take me back.
yeah, so in 2016, I started an online magazine, Epiffiana, which just I decided to make the big girl move and close that down last month. So it's closed. Um, Website's still up. It was a online Latina digital magazine. I had a team of 10. I loved it. But I felt like in this season of my life, I just didn't have room for it anymore. And so that's what I was doing from 2016. So I've been doing like a lot of remote working since then, running the magazine, doing just being a social media consultant, marketing consultant for different organizations, different solo entrepreneurs, just working with clients throughout the country. And then just sort of building up my freelance career because I knew I graduated from grad school in 2016, so with my MBA. And before that, I was working in nonprofit sector and just doing a lot of different just 9 to 5 careers. And I knew once I graduated from grad school, I didn't really want to go back into the office. I just always knew it wasn't my strength to be in an office to 9 to 5. I am so much better at strategy, big picture, and I wanted to build something. So that's what I did in 2016. So in 2016, I created the magazine and just grew it over time. And then I had like freelance work, whether it was helping people with their social media, with their website, with their overall branding, leading like a lot of workshops. Then 2020 came, and I was doing the consulting work and I was really enjoying the consulting work. And I felt like this is the work that could probably bring in the most income. Let's be realistic, right? But I also knew I'm like, I don't want to be chasing clients myself all the time. That can get really exhausting. Being mindful of the fact that, like, I'm still relatively young. I'm in my 30s. And so there's going to be seasons in my life where I'm not going to be in the best place to always network and always find a client and always be out. And so I figured it would be great to partner with someone, to bring someone on so we could balance the workload. And so that way, if that person's having a bad day, then I could do the work and then vice versa. And so in 2020, I asked Giselle, who my business partner, if she would like to start a la mode branding with me. At first, it was just a marketing consulting company. We came up with the name a la mode. And I asked her because her and I have been working together on and off on different projects for the last several years. Like we were just always in the same circle. And to be quite frank, she sort of like I don't want to say intimidated me, but she has such a different like rhythm and philosophy in life and just like mindset that it was also like an exercise for me to work with someone that's not exactly like me.
Yeah.
We have a lot of similarities. We both grew up in large families. We're both Mexican American. And so we had that common, but we just approach work and life differently. So I was like, oh, let me bring her on. But it's also, she has such a different skill set, right? She's great at like more like financial projections and just business assessment. And so I was like, let's just come together and start this company. And it was interesting to start a company during a pandemic because we had to start it completely online.
Yeah.
Met like online, like met through Zoom. So many times a week. Getting our first client, building up our client portfolio. And it's been really amazing just to see it grow. I want to say since 2021, we've had always like a client. Because 2020, we're just building it out and trying to figure out like who do we want to serve and what type of services we want to provide.
Takes time. Yeah.
It takes time, and then like state paperwork, because we were both so used to being solo entrepreneurs that if you're in a partnership, you have to fill out like a general partnership form with the state of California. Now we're LLCs, so we have to fill out all those LLC forms, and it was a lot. So yeah, so we've been a company since 2020, and it's just been really cool just to watch that company grow and do a lot of different consulting work and just doing work that I feel like we wouldn't be able to do individually because we're using each other's skill sets,
Yeah. So what
Yeah.
would you say your top strategy for success is?
Mm. Never get too comfortable. If you start feeling like work is too comfortable and safe, or your life is, and by comfortable, I mean like mundane, like you're doing the same thing over and over again. I want everyone to be like physically, mentally, and emotionally safe, you know? Um,
Yes, of course.
but but you know, like just if it gets too mundane and it gets too similar, and you're surrounding yourself with the same type of people that think this similar to you and act similar to you, then it's time for a change, right? Because then you're not growing. And so I feel like you have to have just an array of different types of personalities around you, an array of different types of work. So that's one. Two, figuring out what you like and love to do, and then what you're good at. Because sometimes what you love to do, you know, work towards doing that more. So for me as a consultant, there's so many different packages I could offer people. And there's work in it that I love to do. And then there's work of it that I am just good at. And it's a hard pill to swallow when the work you are good at just pays more than the work you love. But if you are just starting out, look at your personal finances. You may just have to do that work a little bit longer, but keep building your skill set to doing the work that you love to do, right?
Yeah.
So recognizing that, and then also recognizing the work that just absolutely drains you and that you hate to do. So whether that's bringing on a partner that likes to do that, outsourcing it, whether that's an intern, a virtual assistant, if you're able to, because you only have so many hours in your day. And as an entrepreneur, your days can be very long. And you don't want to have to do really mundane things. So
I love that.
Yeah.
Those are some really unique strategies for success. And I think that actually ties back to like, what is your definition for success? But clearly your definition for success is growing. Like as long as you're growing and as long as you're walking towards alignment, because let's be honest, I don't know that on this earth it's possible for us to fully 100% walk in alignment. We can walk like parallel to our alignment, but it's really like, I don't know. Maybe I'm wrong. And that's okay if I am. But I think that the goal is if you've already arrived, like let's say you're aligned, right? Okay, you're aligned, which right now I actually am coincidentally in a season where I feel like I'm aligned, but I'm also like hesitantly aligned, right? Like I'm like, I know that this is what I've been praying for. This is what I've been like manifesting and envisioning and all of those good things. But I'm also like, but this isn't the end of the story for me, you know, like I'm not just going to expect that this is the pace of my life and the opportunities that I'll have forever. So continuing to grow in that, but I feel successful right now. So that's kind of what I heard you saying in these strategies for success is like, never get too comfortable, because if you're too comfortable, then you're not growing. And two, like recognize what you love to do versus what drains you. But if you have to walk through a season that you're doing the work that drains you so that you can get to doing what you love to do, that's still success. Exactly. That's still a strategy for success.
Yes. And so one of the things I remember saying a lot during the pandemic, especially 2020 and 2021, you know, because again, at that time I was living in Oakland. And so California, I think we just compared to some other states has stricter laws, you know, we weren't able to go out as much. But I remember like there were some people that were just really, and everyone is on their journey, but you know, was really affected by the pandemic, was really just sad or, you know, mentally affected or emotionally. And for me, I was just like, this is, and I say this a lot, I'm like, this is just your life right now. This isn't going to be your life forever, you know? And so that having that mindset even during the pandemic helped, because I'm like, all right, I can't leave my apartment. I don't get to see my friends in person. I, you know, didn't get to see my family for a little bit, but then afterwards I added them to like my bubble and just had to wear masks, you know, everywhere. I'm like, this is just life right now. And so I think like when it comes to success, it's just realizing sometimes like this is just your life in this moment. If there's something in this moment that you don't like, then you can work towards getting away from that.
Yeah.
Right.
You can work to change it.
You can work towards changing it. And if that work means that sometimes you need a season where you're just laying in bed and you're just, feeling all your feelings, then that's what your body and your mind's calling for. You just need that.
Yeah.
That's
But
where you
also go
are
to
right now.
therapy.
Yes.
But also go
Yeah.
to therapy. You can go to therapy now, like from your bed. So if
Yeah.
that's
I,
like
I go to therapy through BetterHelp. So there we go.
yeah,
I see my therapist online,
yeah,
basically from here. Um, so recognizing that your life is in different seasons. And like I feel like in this life you have different versions of yourself, right?
yeah,
So I feel like this version of myself is really good at X, Y, and Z, but is still working on ABC, right?
yeah,
And then the next versions, might flip. And I think as we get older and we're on this like journey of life, the goal is, I personally think, to have more good than bad, and to have shorter periods in the valley and longer periods on like the mountaintop.
yes.
That's where you're aiming towards. Doesn't mean there's never going to be valleys, but
Hmm.
it's shorter period of time, and you know yourself better. You can get out of that valley quicker, because I'm like, yeah, I'm in my 30s. Both my parents are alive, but I'm sure I'm gonna hit a valley when they both pass away, or if Nick gets really sick. Like, there's gonna be hard times still ahead, but just working on yourself so you are prepared for that.
Yeah. Developing that resilience so that you
Yeah.
can continue to overcome. I love that.
Yeah.
Well, real quick, I have to talk about creative processing because
Yes.
creative processing is an amazing healing method, no
Yes.
matter where you're at in life. But it's especially helpful for those bad days because let's be
Yeah.
honest, we all have those bad days.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and truly, it's been a game changer for me in especially seasons where I'm really feeling the weight of depression or a lot of anxiety.
Mm-hmm.
And even in my current season of just kind of navigating some tough things that we don't really have answers to right now,
Yeah.
um, being able to set my intention and create helps create that space for me to enjoy this life that we have, even in the midst of hard times. So,
Mm-hmm.
creative processing, just as a refresher, is a tool that we can
Mm-hmm.
all use to activate our creative minds to process through a certain intention. So, we can use a prompt like the purpose of enter your creative method, whether that is cleaning or reorganizing, or somebody last week said that theirs was walking on the beach. And I was like, wow, what an interesting way to engage your creative mind, but it works for her.
Mm-hmm.
But anyway, the purpose of enter your creative method is to enter your certain intention. So any intention you have, whether that's to improve your marriage or that's to process your child, a certain day in your childhood. For me, sometimes I process like Mother's Day because Mother's Day is a particularly hard day for me.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, you shared with me that your creative processing methods are dancing in your office, writing, journaling, and organizing your space. And I just have a question for you. Have you ever used or done any of those creative methods and paired them with an intention? Like intentionally
Mm.
set an intention to dance in your office
Yeah,
or to
no.
journal?
I don't think I'm like, okay, after this, I'm going to feel this way. I don't think I've ever done it intentionally. I think I just feel a negative way, or I'm feeling overwhelmed, and I do one of those things. Like dancing in my office comes a lot when I have a lot of like nervous energy. And surprisingly, I do it a lot more at night, like when I'm trying to wind down, where I just need to dance out the last part of my energy, and then I can like read a book and like go to bed. But
Yeah.
it's like this leftover energy.
Yeah.
Um,
So
but
I
it's
would
not like,
say that yes, that is your intention. It's maybe just a subconscious thing, which I think is how creative processing works typically. And that's
mm-hmm,
actually the end goal of learning to do it in a conscious way, is that subconsciously you are retraining yourself to do those things as a first response rather than curling up in your bed and just crying for hours and hours. Instead, you're going to dance in your office or reorganize a space. So it
yeah,
sounds like subconsciously you're already doing that. And like, you're like, I feel overwhelmed. So I'm just going to do this thing. Or, I have a lot of nervous energy, so I'm going to dance right now. It's
Yeah.
like you just did it backwards as far as, but there's no right or wrong way to do creative processing. You're just doing it. I
Yeah.
love that.
And one of the things I loved about that question is that I realized a lot of the things I do now as an adult, I've done since I was a kid. Like I've always danced in my room as a kid. Um, like I love creating playlists on Spotify. I was a kid that had like a bunch of CDs. Like for a few years there, my parents always bought me like the latest newest radio, the one with the 3 or 4 or 6 CD
Yeah.
slots. So I'm like, oh, these are things I still do. And like journaling I did when I was a kid. Journaling is more of like now as an adult, if I feel like there's like anger or sadness pent up and I just need to let it out, and letting it out verbally is not really going to help anyone. So just writing it out. Just so it gets out, of my system, and I could just like, okay, that is done.
Yes, I love that. Well, thank you so much for answering that question. And before we wrap up today, I would love for you just to tell us a little bit about what's coming up next for you. Anything exciting in your life or business?
Yes. So as I mentioned, so Pifion Magazine's no longer, it's a little sad, but now I'm focusing more on my personal brand, which Danielle is helping me with. So it's Just Nicole Co, which is sort of funny to say, Just Nicole Cole. There you go. And so one of the first events I'm doing with that brand is I am monitoring like a panel discussion with 2 Latina authors. It's going to be at the Rip Bodice, and it's going to be on October 7th. Let me look at the calendar because it's a Saturday. There you go. Yeah, October 7th at 5 p.m. So if you are in the LA, Culver City area, the Rip Bodice is a really cool bookstore. And so I will be talking to 2 Latina artists or 2 Latina authors about just being Latina authors. They're going to share about their latest books. I'm really excited about that event. So that's what's coming up.
And then you're going to be doing lots more of events, more events in the future. So people need to stay tuned.
I'm so excited for that. And then that's just coming up professionally, just getting work done. And then personally, we are going to Washington, D.C. at the end of the month, in Jersey. And then we're going to spend some time in Mexico City for next month. So,
yay. Well, you've got some big fun things happening. I love that you're still embracing your love of travel and also doing.
I got back from Palm Springs yesterday. So,
yes. She's still out there. That's why you're the digital nomad.
Yes. Thank
you.
Nicole,
I am so grateful to have spent some time with you here today and for your courage and your vulnerability to share your story. Your ability to create space for others while also protecting your own peace and prioritizing what's most important to you is beyond inspiring. And I am just so grateful that our paths have connected. Just keep being just Nicole and boldly showing up to influence and make the impact on this world that you have been called to make. You, my friend, are created worthy. Thanks for listening and tuning in to the Created Worthy podcast. I hope that today's show resonated with you. And if it did, can you do me a huge favor and go leave a 5-star review? This helps more listeners find the show, and it expands the reach of the stories and concepts that are shared here. All the links and guest information are in the show notes. And if you're on social media, come hang out with me. You can find the Created Worthy podcast on both Instagram and Facebook, or come follow along with my personal IG page, where I just share more about the real, sometimes messy life of your fellow worthy warrior. Can't wait to talk to you soon, friend. And don't forget, we are all created worthy.